Hi everybody, I am AMARDEEP. Thank you so much for making my talk, given it's lunchtime, first and foremost. And secondly, that it's on a topic that's quite interesting but has been talked about a lot already. So I'm going to try and make it a little bit more engaging for you today. So I'll just start a little bit with who am I, because a lot of people are probably thinking, who is this girl who's speaking at Big Data London, and what the hell is AMARDEEP? Why is it so similar to her name? So I'm going to talk with that a little bit first. So my name is AMARDEEP. I am the co-founder and the head of technology at a small consultancy, small but growing consultancy that specializes in data. And we opened and started in the pandemic. I've got my two lovely business partners with me here today, James and Ben. Give the crowd a wave. As usual, they're really shy and they force me to do this and they're not doing it themselves. But again, you know, they're men. Don't like that one. So we started in the pandemic, and I think that's really important to note because we didn't know that a pandemic was going to start. I think we officially started operating 1st of April 2020, but we started forming in the sort of previous months. And what we found very, very quickly is that we have to do everything online, obviously like all of us did. So that's why I think this topic is really important, not just from the pandemic, but going forward, because a lot of organizations are still working either in hybrid or fully remote. So how do we make, and global now as well. So whereas perhaps you worked in London or Leeds, which is where I'm from, and you hired your team from that area, you're not looking at that now. Also, the pandemic taught us that we could look in other areas for the skill set that we needed. And that's why I think this topic is still quite important today. So, we all work in technology in some way. So we've known that working from home and collaborating with people maybe from other parts of the UK and other parts of the world has always been something that we do. But it became really, really important in the pandemic. And after that, I know that there's quite a big rush at the moment. There's quite a big trend to get back to the office. But we're still working with teams remotely and specifically in other countries. So why is communication and collaboration so important? Well, we know why it is important. But what is the fundamental thing that we need to do in order to be able to communicate and collaborate with anybody? And I think that is a relationship. If you don't have a relationship with people, how are you possibly going to communicate and collaborate with anyone? And I'm going to give you a little bit of an example. Have you ever been passed the phone by your parents or by somebody and they're like, oh, say hi, and you have nothing to say, and you kind of stand there with the phone a little bit awkward, and you're like, yeah, I'm good. And you kind of do that to the other person to give the phone back. And it's not because you're being rude, and it's not because you don't know what to say. The problem is there's no relationship there to fall back into it. Versus that friend that you have, that you can go for years not speaking to them, months not speaking to them, and then when you speak to them, it's like you've spoke yesterday, and it comes back really natural. All of that is built on relationships, and I think we focus so much on communicating, collaborating, all these buzzwords, agile, and we forget that fundamentally we're human beings and we need to build a relationship. And that doesn't necessarily mean you need to love that person. You need to, have the best relationship. It just means there needs to be a relationship there. We all have colleagues that we work with that outside of work probably wouldn't want to say hi to them, but there's a relationship there enough for me to be able to communicate and collaborate with them. So a lot of my talk today is going to be on the relationship of how you can, building a relationship so that you can communicate and you can collaborate. So we are at big data, so I'm going to relate everything back to data as much as I can. And the first thing I want to talk about before I go on is what is communication and what is collaboration, because I could ask a room full of people like yourselves, what do you think communication means? And I would love for somebody to tell me an answer. Anyone? What do you think communication means? And I don't need like a textbook answer. I just need, what do you think communication means? If you don't volunteer, I'm going to pick you out. Thank you. Sharing ideas, perfect. Sharing ideas. You want to give information to someone else. That's what communication is. The most important thing of communication, though, is whether they understood what you were saying. So if you're talking to anybody, and this can apply to both business, but also to your real life, if you're communicating with someone and they're doing this, they don't know what you are on about. And you fucking know they don't. You know that they don't know what's going on, and you go, all right, cool, thanks, brilliant, and you walk off. So whereas communication is important, what's even more important is have they understood? So that's the angle I'm going to take on communication today. Collaboration, if I said, oh, how do we collaborate now that we're all remote? People are going to start telling me about Zoom and Teams and Miro, and I don't really care. We've been using that for years and years and years and years. And you know what? We still have teams that can't stand each other and don't want to work together. So actually, does a tool work? No. A tool is a facilitator to collaboration. But what actually is collaboration? What does it mean to collaborate? Can anybody tell me what it means to collaborate? I'll pick someone. I'm good at that. I got 30 minutes, so I can wait. Mutual respect. That's a very good one. Mutual respect. It means I respect you enough to listen to what you've got to say so that we can come to a conclusion that we are happy with. That's what collaboration means. Thank you. It does not mean we're going to get on Miro, we're going to write everything down, you've got 30 minutes, you've got 5 minutes, everyone put a sticky note on Miro, I'll collect all the information at the end and send out a summary. And I can see so many people laughing because I know for a fact this week you've probably done it or someone's done it to you. That is not what collaboration is. Collaboration is, despite what I feel about you, because I've got a pre-existing relationship, I can respect what you're bringing to the table, I can bring mine to the table, and I can ask you what you're bringing to the table, and we can get to a solution. If you understand the fundamentals of what communication and collaboration are, you are able to build a relationship. If you can build a relationship, everything that's scary about working remotely goes out the window, because it's no different to then ringing your friend and having that conversation after years. Do you know what's really off-putting? When someone walks out of your talk, like midway through, someone just did it, and it's probably because she needs the toilet, and I feel so off. And 2 more people are leaving. This is so embarrassing. Thank you. Perfect. So what I'm going to talk about now is the fundamentals of it, which is building relationships. So in order to build relationships, we need to understand each other. And in order to understand each other, what we're actually doing here is collecting data on each other. And the data that we're collecting is static and dynamic data. The static data that we are collecting, I'm sure we can, if I have a conversation with, I'll just pick somebody from work, from somewhere where I work. I'll just pick one of my business partners. The static data is that my business partner lives in X part of the world. They live in, I'm just going to make it all up. They live in Coventry. And they also were born in this year. And another static data is maybe their race. And their age is not, their age is dynamic because it changes every year. But the dynamic data is going to be, their skill set. Their skill set is continuously going to improve or change. So now that I've collected some static data and some dynamic data, I can decide how I want to take that relationship forward. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to be able to make loads of prejudices or be biased to them. It just means that I know this about this individual, that's static, that's always going to remain, and I need to bear in mind the fact that they also have all this dynamic data. Why is the dynamic data so important? Well, in the data world, the dynamic data upholds the integrity of the data because it continuously changes and it's up-to-date data. Well, the dynamic data of a human being also changes. Yesterday, I might have had an argument with one of my business partners, let's say Ben, about something because his view on something was X based on his knowledge. And then over a few weeks, he might have really thought, I didn't really know much about that subject, and it got quite heated in the Miro session when I was putting my post-its on the board. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to research a little bit, and I'm going to come back to the table. I'm going to say, hey, AMARDEEP, can I have another session? Because actually, I want to talk a little bit more about X, and X could be anything. Well, his dynamic data's changed. Should I sit there and think, no, Ben, you didn't know what you was talking about. You were rude. Should I do that? But we do that. We all do that because we don't treat humans as humans. We don't strengthen relationships to ultimately allow us to effectively communicate and collaborate with them. It's not about me telling you 16 tools that are really effective to collaborate. What's more important is that I tell you to build a relationship, and that relationship, especially in the workplace, is based on respect. Now, if you don't respect someone and you don't care for their opinion, I can't help you. There's nothing that I can say in 30 minutes over the lunch period when there's so much noise around me that's going to help you in that situation. But what I can do is hopefully talk to you about relationships. So, going back to the data again. So the dynamic data will really strengthen your relationship because you'll have the fundamentals, which is the static, and you can build on it. And I'll give you an example. One of the hardest things to do is work with a remote team, and I'm obviously going to go with the UK, that doesn't work UK hours. So we know that, and one of the teams that I work is, we call them our India colleagues. And our Indian colleagues, they come on a lot earlier than us, so they've started working by 6, 7 a.m. And by 2, 3 p.m., really, it's their evening. So although we might put meetings in at 4 o'clock, we probably shouldn't. Now, it's different if your organisation is set up so that everybody works UK hours, because then everyone around the world is working that kind of 9 to 5. But what do you do with a meeting that needs to go in, or a session that needs to happen, but it's going to be at 4:30 on a Thursday, and you've got colleagues that by the time it gets to 4:30, it's either 6 a.m. or it's 7 p.m. What do you do? Can you put your hand up if you work with colleagues outside of the UK in different time zones? Okay, so a few people. What does anyone do in that situation? You have to shout, sorry.
So I usually work with a lot of Indian colleagues. So usually what I do is I try to be mindful of their timings and schedule those meetings or whatever those discussions need to be held at a time where it's much earlier for them, and the business can also be available within that 9 to 5 meeting. So I'm more mindful to the approach that I need to be mindful of their time and respect that they're human beings in the end and they're working with different schedules. So I need to collaborate with them in a time frame which is easier for them and easier for me. So find middle ground.
Perfect. So is that still okay? So finding the middle ground. Do most people do that? What if you can't? Oh, you didn't hear what he said, sorry. So what he said is usually he will schedule a meeting, I'm paraphrasing, he will schedule a meeting mindful of what their time zones are. But what if you can't? What if you've got a go live, or whatever you want to call it, that happens tomorrow at 8 a.m. UK time, and everything's been fine for a week, and then today at 3:30 p.m, a bug came in, and you can't go live? What do you do at that point? Yes. You're going to have to shout. Have we got a mic? Oh, he's finding a mic. Sorry, when I did this, it didn't work. And it was really uncomfortable for the other person, I think. Thank you. just this gentleman over here. Is it working? Maybe talk into it?
1, 2, and 2. Now it's working. Yeah, so I think we're very lucky to have great working relationship with our colleagues in India as well. And if it's paramount that we catch up in their out of hours, they will kindly do it for us. And if it's paramount that we catch up in our out of hours for their benefit, we will do that too. So I think it's just having this basis of great working relationship and meeting each other, and sort of giving way to each other. It's fine, yeah.
Yeah. All right, perfect. So we have you use the word relationship there. We've got some good relationships where I can contact them. Now, I'm not saying that you need to be able to contact everybody outside of office hours, and I'm not saying that. And I understand the whole quiet quitting. I understand that. But what I'm saying is when you've got such a good relationship, we spend most of our time in work. I don't mind if somebody needs to contact me at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. because there's been an urgent issue, and there actually is it's warranted an urgent issue. But that's built on relationships. Where I wouldn't be comfortable and they wouldn't get a response is when there isn't a relationship. If somebody randomly contacts me and says, hey, we've got a P1, which we all know hopefully is the most critical issue you can have in your organisation, and I don't know that person and they don't know me, I'm going to be like, all right, cool, but I'm at dinner, so now what? I'm not going to just be like, oh my God, yeah, let me help you, because I haven't tried to build a relationship. So I think that also is important when you think about your team. Is your team just that circle of people? No, it's not actually. Your team is not just that circle of people. You have the circle of people that you work with day to day, and then you kind of have those fringe people. So for me, somebody who's tried in one of the clients that we work with, somebody who's tried to make quite a big effort with me, and I know why, and create such a good relationship is the on-call manager. So it's not anybody in technology, it's just the manager that manages the on-call rota. And she's made such an effort to create a relationship with me, and I know why. Because ultimately, if somebody phones in sick and we are managing that product out of hours, she doesn't know what to do at that point. Yeah, of course, you go to the next person, but what if there's always situations when you can't get in touch with somebody. There's always situations. She knows that she's built such a good relationship, she can at least drop me a text and say, hey, AMARDEEP, what should I do in this situation? And we can at least support, because for a lot of people, your job is 9 to 5 and that's okay, but for a lot of people, it kind of does extend. It's a little bit more flexible that. You might be in a role that expects a little bit more. But without having the relationship, you really truly can't have those situations. You can only have a relationship if you understand that there's dynamic data involved. What is relevant today for me might not be relevant in 2 months' time. I've got no children. I run a business. My business is relatively new. We're growing. I know that when I took this on, I'm going to be busy all the time. A year down the line, I might have a child. If I do at that point, my colleagues are going to have to understand that my dynamic data has changed. It's now up to date. Whereas AMARDEEP could be available for a call at 7 a.m. with a company in India, or at 6 p.m. with a company in the US. She's not. She's doing bath time. And she wants to do bath time. So unless we understand and know that, how can we effectively communicate or collaborate with anybody? So I just need to open my book again. And the important thing is, that's your one data source. Your one data source is that human being. Their static data and their dynamic data. Your single source, that's all you've got. Something happening up there, so loads of people look up there. So, it's a pigeon. And that was more interesting, yeah? Great. And that's your single. And now I want you to consider other sources of data to help you communicate and collaborate. So your team makeup. What do you do now if you've got a client and two or three consultancies working together? You've got 2 or 3 external parties. You've got yourselves, if you're not part of an external, and you are forced into a situation where there's loads of milestones and loads of delivery dates, and there's no flex on the scope, and there's no flex on the budget, and there's no flex on the time. And what do you do in that situation? You've now got another data source, which is the team makeup, how they interact with each other, provides you even more data. And that, watching people, sounds really bad, watching people is so important. It's so important to sit and watch how people interact, because all they're doing is providing you with so much data for you to truly understand how to effectively communicate with that team or that individual and collaborate with them, because what works for you might not work for you. I might think, okay, this is how I communicate, and if you understand it, you understand it, and if you don't, that's on you. But actually, it's on the person who's giving the information. So the way I explain a situation to yourself, I will hopefully have such a good relationship where you'll be like, I don't know what you're talking about, or you'll say, I do. It might be different to how I speak to someone else. So you need to look at your different data sources as well, and one of the biggest ones is that team makeup. How does your team interact with each other, especially if we've got different, it's not just a team of permanent members. If there's other people in that team, you're going to get so much data from that, watching them interact. Not just that, how does that team now interact with another team in your organization? And especially when there's dependencies there. So if there's a dependency, this is quite a common one. Usually there's something in information security or somewhere in that area that might block something. Or you didn't consider this, you didn't consider that. How is your team interacting with that team? Observing that and understanding that two-way traffic will give you more data to understand, so my team are comfortable here, and they listen, not just listen, but they collaborate and they work really well here. But when I enter another team, then they don't understand what I'm on about. They don't collaborate very effectively, and ultimately we're not a very productive team, and we're not a happy team. So that's another data source that you really need to listen to. So if we allow dynamic data to change, and we expect it to change, and we want it to change, why don't we let humans? Why don't we allow humans to change their mind or gain more knowledge and provide a different opinion? Why do we hold them ransom to yesterday's opinion? Yes? You shout at me.
Because we have the power as employees to do that.
We have the power and the...
As employees, we have the power. As an employer, we have the power to keep people stay in the same position.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want them to change because quite often, have you ever had a colleague, or it might be yourself? That's a really good point. Thank you so much. Have you ever had a colleague, or or is it yourself that you think to yourself, you know what? I got this job and I loved this job, but I've really grown in this job, and I know I deserve that promotion, or I want to apply for that position, but for some reason they've gone external and they're not even taking internal applications. It's because usually an organization wants to keep you there, not because they don't want you to succeed, because you're very good there. So that's one example, really good example, but for me it's more important to discuss about why, to internally reflect why we hold people accountable to their opinion from 10 years ago, their opinion from yesterday. Actually, don't we want people to grow and learn? Don't we want people to bring all the knowledge to the table so that we can collaboratively get to a solution that we all respect, that we all align? People talk all the time about, everybody's not aligning, they're not aligned. They're not aligned because they don't care. They're not aligned because they don't like that person, they don't like that person, they disagree. So you have to build those foundations first. So with the various data sources, now what we're doing is a bit of data collaboration. What we're doing is we're gathering data from the various different sources, and we're hopefully sharing it as well. We're sharing it because we're in this honest and open bubble. We've got a couple of minutes, so I'm going to rush through now. And it's really, really important to identify which data is relevant. And I'm talking about human beings here. Is it important that I have short hair? Hopefully not. Hopefully not. Is it important that the makeup of us is 2 white and one brown? No. Is it important? Is it relevant? Is it relevant data of my age? I'm not going to disclose it. I'm going to let you, guess. Is it important though? No, it's not. So what we have to also try and do is get rid of our biases. We get consumed with all this data. So I know Ben, and Ben is X and Y and Z, and I know this about his life, and I know this about his life, and I know X. When it comes to me and Ben making business decisions, despite personally what we think about each other, we bring into the room the most relevant data about each other, and then we hold each other to that standard, and that is what's important. What data is the most relevant? Is it the static? Is it dynamic? Is it a makeup of the two? Static's always going to be the same. I'm always going to be a woman right now. I'm always choosing to be a woman. And also, research suggests that organizations, they don't even use up to 68 to 70% of their data. That means if we're not using it when it matters in work, we're not using it when we speak to someone, we're choosing that 30 to 40%, making a decision, creating an opinion, and then thinking to ourselves when I walk in, do you know what, I really, really don't like what Ben's done with his hair. So that's going to piss me off now, and I'm not going to listen to anything that he says. And do you know what? His solution's shit. Which happens all the time because we've made our decisions based on the data that we just want to get rid of. So, the summary. You need to know what data. So, in order to effectively communicate and collaborate with your teams, that could be next to you and could be remote. It's really important to know what data you have available. What do you know about your colleagues? I'm not saying you need to go and be their agony aunt unless you want to, but what do you actually know about these people? What is their static data and what is their dynamic data? Remember, yesterday's price is not today's price. Always remember that. What has changed in their life? Know about your colleagues, use various sources of data kind of gathering. Okay, so this is how AMARDEEP is when she's talking to a crowd. However, which I'm quite surprised about, I've got a nasty potty mouth, and I've really tempered it today, and I don't know why, but when I'm with a certain group of people, oh my mouth is like that. So we've got to look at the different variants. So AMARDEEP speaking on stage might not swear as much. AMARDEEP speaking a small group of people, she's not going to stop swearing. AMARDEEP in this group of people is going to do this. AMARDEEP in that. Look at your various sources. Know about your colleagues. And use that information to decide how you want to communicate and collaborate. If your job is to contribute, last point, if your job is to contribute and you don't feel comfortable to contribute, I would ask you to do that same exercise. Look at the people around you. Find where you do feel comfortable, find your dynamic data, find your static data, and find the area where you feel comfortable to say something in a group of people where you want to give your opinion, because we are all intelligent people, and yesterday's price is not today's price. So if you think yesterday somebody's like stupid, or they're not very good, or they don't know about data lineage, so why are they talking? Knowledge graphs, you don't know anything about a knowledge graph. What data source are you using to make your opinion? Because actually, she might be able to talk about knowledge graphs all day long, but instead she was given a topic on communication collaboration. So decide which data you want to take the correct data, go into the safe space and collaborate effectively. Obviously, there's lots of tools available to help you collaborate, but you won't be able to collaborate effectively, even in a retro, if you haven't built relationships. You cannot sit in a retro and say, that sprint was the shittest sprint we've ever done, and feel safe to say that if you've not got a relationship with your whole team that is open and honest. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for attending.